Genetics. Welcome to this lesson of genetics. Okay, so we're going to look at genetics. A very interesting topic, okay, in biology. So, and this comes question 5. So genetics is the study of inheritance and heredity. So it is a study of inheritance and heredity. It's a study of inheritance and heredity. That is what we call genetics. So usually people think that when talk about inheritance, we talk about what your parents have left for you when they've died. But when you talk about inheritance in terms of genetics, it's much more important than just the cars, the houses that you're going to inherit. But when we talk about inheritance in terms of genetics, it's more way important. Okay, so now after looking at that, genetics is a study of inheritance and heredity from the parents. We now talk about the terms used in genetics. So we now look at the terms used in genetics. So we will look at them one by one as we move, as we learn this interesting topic. Okay, so number one, we'll talk of a gene. So a gene is a basic unity of inheritance. It is a basic unit of inheritance. Is the basic unity of inheritance. That is what we call a gene. It's a basic unity of inheritance. What we mean by basic is that very important. You cannot do away without a gene. That's what you're saying. It's a basic unity of inheritance. So when you talk about a gene, these guys, they are found in a chromosome, which will be the next term that is found in genetics. So now, genes are found in a chromosome. Okay, so there is a gene for height. There are those that are tall. There are those that they are, in our society, they say, I love that guy because he's tall. I love that lady because of the height. I love the height, the way she is. She's tall. She's what. Others will say, I like the way this girl is short. I like the way this boy is short. So there's gene for height. Then there's also gene for skin color. There is also a gene for skin color. Are we together? So I like the way this lady is. She's light. Others will say, no, I like this one because she's dark. Everything like that is what we call a gene for skin color. We also have a gene for eye color as well. So the eye color as well. So we have genes for that. Okay, so we now go to the next term. Okay, so now this is a chromosome that we're talking about. So it is a structure found inside the nucleus of the cell that carry the genes of an organism. Okay, so then we also talk about these guys. They consist of coiled. They consist of a coiled DNA. So this is a chromosome. So this chromosome is made up of what we call sister chromatids. Okay, so as we can see here, this one and this one, these are called the sister chromatids. Okay, they are called the sister chromatids. So then this guy here
is called the centromere. It's the one that is holding the what? The sister chromatids together. Then the coiling, which is inside here, is the one we call DNA. So that's why we're saying they consist of coiled DNA inside. Okay. So please, this is a sister chromatid, of course. Unfortunately, there is no brother chromatid, but there's only sister chromatid. Okay, so now we look at the third one. So the third one is alleles. Others will read it as allele, but we'll go for alleles. So alleles, it is an alternative term of a gene. What do you mean by alternative? It is what do you mean by alternative is versions. Okay, there can be two versions altogether. A gene this time around, we know, is a basic unit of inheritance, and there can be a gene for height, a gene for skin color, a gene for eye color altogether. Now, what we mean by alleles, it is an alternative term of a gene. Now, let me make you understand here. Let me give you an example here. Okay, so what we are saying is it is an alternative term of a gene. So the gene for height has two versions. So we have short and tall. So when we talk about alternative form, it's just the versions. Okay, so for example, alternative form of a gene of the height, a gene for height. So alternative, they can either be short or tall. So now letters such as capital letter T are used to represent tall, then small letter T is representing short. are used to represent alleles for the genes. Phenotype number 4. These are physical characteristics of an organism. So the way the organism looks, those are what we call phenotype. So phenotype of an organism describes what the organism looks like as a result of its genotype. Are we together? So that is what we mean by phenotype. Just the physical characteristic of an organism. How the person looks, those are what we call phenotype. Now, in this definition of phenotype, it introduced another word which is very important, which is genotype. So now, the next term that we are going to look at will be called what? Genotype. Genotype, that's number 5. This is a genetic composition of an organism for a particular characteristic. This is a genetic composition of an organism for a particular characteristic. So that is what we mean by a genotype. It's just a genetic composition. Okay, so now the genotype is normally written using a pair of letters, each representing one allele. E.g., we have capital letters AA, capital letter A and small letter a, and AA small letters. So when you talk about genotype, we represent it much using letters. You will see when you start looking at the genetic diagrams, you will see how we'll be using genotype. Where there is genotype, we use letters. So in summary, we are saying genotype, this is a genetic composition of an organism for a particular characteristic. Simple as that. Okay, so now we now look at homozygous. Homozygous this word homo means the same. Okay, so this is a type of genotype where both alleles are the same. Okay, that is both dominant or both recessive. Both dominant or recessive. Okay, so we can see AA, these are both dominant. AA, these are both recessive. If I want, I can put this both dominant. So if it is dominant, we use capital letter T, we use capital letters. If it is recessive, you use small letters. So this is the type of genotype where both alleles are the same. Remember, in genotype we said this is a genetic composition of an organism for a particular characteristic. The genotype is normally written using a pair of letters. Okay, so now if the pair of letters are capital letters, a pair means two, right? So if the capital letters there are two, okay, that is going to be homozygous. So that type of genotype is called what? Homozygous, because the letters are the same and they are capital. Are we together? It is homozygous dominant. So if the capital letters are the same, that is going to be homozygous dominant. Then if the letters are small and they are two and they are the same, we're going to say homozygous recessive. Remember, when you're using dominant, you use capital letters. Recessive, use small letters. We go to heterozygous. This is the type of genotype where the two alleles are different, such as one is dominant while the other is recessive. Look at this one. We have capital letter A and small letter a. This is going to be heterozygous. Why? We have two alleles that are different. The other one is dominant, the other one is recessive. That's what we are saying. Now, note that this point is very important. Organisms which are homozygous are called homozygotes or pure breeds. So there is a question that define pure breeds. Okay, so just simply the organisms that have both alleles that are what? The same. So they can be called homozygotes or pure breeds. Then organisms which are heterozygous are called heterozygotes or hybrids. So hybrids are heterozygous. So hetero means different. Now, if we look at here, we are saying homozygous. This is a type of genotype where both alleles are the same. That is both dominant or both recessive. So homozygous and heterozygous have brought us to know the terms known as dominant allele and recessive. So this is the one now we are going to look at. We'll start with the dominant allele. Okay, so we now look at dominant allele. So it is an allele that gets expressed in the phenotype of an offspring to the exclusion of another what? Another allele. Are we together? So it is an allele that gets expressed in the phenotype of an offspring to the exclusion of another allele. Okay, so a dominant allele hides the other allele and it is represented by a capital letter. For example, tall is dominant over short. Tall is dominant over short. Therefore, T is used to represent tall. Now, let me make you understand what we mean that it is an allele that gets expressed in the phenotype of an offspring to the exclusion of another. Okay. Suppose we have a black cow. It mates with a white bull. Okay. So now, let's say now this is the calf. Let's talk about the calf. Okay. The calf, we know that that's the offspring of the two. Now, the calf becomes black in color. So we'll say black calf. Okay, so we'll say black calf. So we can see that this color expressed itself in the offspring, in the phenotype of the offspring, to the exclusion of another. Which one is that another? It is white. Okay, so what we are saying is that when you say dominant allele, okay, that's why there is a gene for fair color, skin color. So since these are cows, we'll say fair color. We'll say what? Fair color. So there is a gene for fair color, right? Then when you say black, white, those are alleles, alternative forms. The versions, there are different versions. There is brown, there is black, there is white. So the versions that we have here, we have black and white. So now you can see that after the offspring was produced, the color of the offspring was what? Black. So meaning this black overshadowed the white. So therefore, how did we know that it overshadowed the white? We saw it in the phenotype of the offspring. What is a phenotype? Physical characteristic of an organism. How the organism looks is what we call the phenotype. So this guy is going to be dominant allele. So black will be called dominant allele, whereas white will be called recessive allele. So recessive allele, it's that allele that has been overshadowed by the presence of a dominant allele. Okay, so if you want to make this guy here, we'll use a capital letter B. Then this one, we can use a capital letter what? We can use a small letter b. Remember, we said that for dominant allele we use capital letters, then for recessive we use these small letters. Okay, so now we go to another term which is called recessive allele. Okay, so now recessive allele, it is an allele that is overshadowed in the phenotype of an offspring by the presence of a dominant allele. It is always represented by a small letter A, B, or T. So now, like we have said that here white color was overshadowed, meaning it was not expressed in the what? In the phenotype of the offspring. It was overshadowed. Therefore, it is going to be a recessive allele. Okay, we now look at codominance. So codominant alleles are two different alleles which are equally expressed in the phenotype of an offspring. They are equally, all of them, they are there. They are there in the phenotype of an offspring. So the best example that we can give, before I even give another one, is that allele A. When we talk about inheritance of blood groups, okay, we have allele A, allele B, and allele O. So now, allele A and allele B, those guys are codominant. They are codominant. So when they meet together, no one will overshadow the other. All of them, they'll be there. That's why we have blood group AB, because allele A was not able to overshadow allele B, and allele B was not able to shadow allele A. That's vice versa, right? So meaning that's why we have blood group AB, because all of them, they are co-dominant. No one can overpower the other. Okay, so let's look at this other example. Okay, let's now look at this. We have the brown bull, which is a male, and we have a black cow. Okay, this guy is mate. Look at the colors, the way they are formed there. We have brown and black calf. So meaning all the alleles, which is allele brown and allele black were equally expressed in the phenotype of the offspring, which is the calf. That's what we are talking about. That is what we call codominance. So we are saying codominant allele are two different alleles which are equally expressed in the phenotype of an offspring. E.g., we will talk of allele A and allele B. We've talked about that. So now, this is the other example that I can give you. So, incomplete dominance, we are saying that incomplete dominant allele, these are two different alleles that are not expressed in the phenotype. Okay, of the offspring. So let's say, for example, here we have a brown bull and a black cow. They met and they formed a white cow. So that is incomplete dominance. So that's where we end. In the terms used in genetics. Okay, so the last one is trait. Physical expression of our genes or alleles. Are we tall or short? Is our skin light or dark, and how dark? Okay, that is a trait. Physical expression of our genes or alleles. And you're done. Physical expression of our genes or alleles. Then that's a trait. It's kind of similar with our phenotype. Okay, so that's where we end here. Go through this thing, understand. Then lesson 2 of genetics will be coming. We'll look at variation. Okay, we are of the same species, but we are different. When you walk in town, you find this one is light, this one is dark. We have white people, we have Indians, we have Lebanese, but we are all humans. Okay, when you look at seeds, you can say these are seeds of beans, but they are different in color, different in sizes. That is what we call variation. Are we together? Then we'll also talk about the causes of variation, and also talk about just a lesson to learn out of that. Why people tend to change the way they are is because people don't value variation. It is because of variation that we are able to appreciate one another. Because if all of us were the same, how can you appreciate something when you have it? You're of the same type. How can you appreciate? You appreciate when something is different. But people don't understand variation. That's why they end up now body shaming, talk of this, talk of that. Are we together? So we'll look at that, and it will be an interesting lesson. So today we're just looking at the introductory to genetics, just looking at the terms, the language that we are going to be using throughout the lesson of genetics. Okay.